Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Danger Boys podcast series. My name is Tappers, and today we're going to be talking about the Beer Hall Putsch that took place in Germany in November 1923. So just quickly before we get into it, the last couple uploads I've done have been Civil War specific, and I'm going to get back to that, I will. But I also want to, branch out a little bit and, start talking about other things as well, not just the American Civil War. And so that Napoleon series I'm working on is still going to come out at some point. But I figured in the meantime, let's talk about World War II. That's a subject I've wanted to breach for a long time now. And I think that today when we talk about the Beer Hall Putsch, I think this is going to be a good starting point. So like I said, it takes place in November 1923. It's going to be involving, Hitler and the Nazis. And yeah, it's gonna be a bit of a full episode. I'm trying this new jazz underneath. We're gonna see. It's not gonna go the whole episode. I just figured it's a nice little intro. But all right, let's get into it. So we're gonna start talking about the Treaty of Versailles. All right. So at the end of World War I, in September 1918, Germany is beginning to collapse. Right. The Allied forces are just, too much for the, for the German nation to kind of handle. The OHL, which stands for like a whole bunch of German words. That's one of the things, too, during this episode, right? A lot of German. I don't speak German. I'm going to do my best with pronunciations, but just kind of stick with me through that. All right. So the OHL, like I said, which stands for like a bunch of German words, basically translates to the Supreme Army Command. And it controls the nation through a dictatorship with men such as Paul von Hindenburg. And like if you know the famous crash that happened in New Jersey, the giant blimp that exploded, rigid airship. It was called the Hindenburg. This is that same Hindenburg. And then the other guy, Erich Ludendorff, he's a top-ranking general within the army. And so during the war, they have major influence over national policy. They're basically running the country, right? And so by the end of October 1918, a revolution begins with German soldiers or German sailors, right? So German sailors are given this order at the end of the war, and they basically realize that it's going to be a death mission. There's no point in doing it. There's no way they can win, and they get, they basically, mutiny, right? And so the captain of the ship, he can't go into battle with a bunch of men that refuse to fight, right? So he goes back to port. And once the men are back in port, this idea that the war's over and we should stop fighting basically kind of spreads across the nation. And so on November 9th, the revolution kind of reaches Berlin, right? And the people of Berlin start getting behind it. Ludendorff tells the Emperor Wilhelm II that he should abdicate the throne, right? He should flee the country. Basically, I said Ludendorff, he's a high-ranking general in the army, and he's like, look, man, I can't control these men anymore. Like, you got to go. And so Wilhelm, he flees. And then so the OHL was the only people who are left, right? Like I said, a lot of the power of the country was in Hindenburg and Ludendorff's hands at the end of the war, but Wilhelm was the emperor, and so, like I said, he leaves. So now it's just Ludendorff and Hindenburg, and so they sign the armistice with the Allies, and basically for the next 9 months or so, there's not an official peace treaty, right? Like the Treaty of Versailles is not signed at this time. It's just a ceasefire and that, conflict's going to stop. And then basically all the allies are going to meet together and they're going to decide the fate of Germany, right? So you got the United Kingdom, you got France, the United States, and Italy. They all meet in Paris, or just outside of Paris in Versailles. And they put on very, very hard and very harsh war repayments on Germany, right? So the OHL has to be disbanded. The monarch has to be disbanded. A new constitution has to be written. And so a whole new government is going to be put into place in Germany, is the theory behind the Treaty of Versailles, right? So they're going to get out all the people that that shouldn't be in power, and they're going to get new people in, and they're going to become a republic, and there's going to be no more war, basically. Well, as soon as the Treaty of Versailles is signed, I mean, literally, like, the day of the treaty being signed, this myth of November criminals arises thanks to Ludendorff, right? So Ludendorff was like, look, the army didn't surrender. We would have kept fighting. The army did not give up. It was the government. It was all the people inside of the Reichstag, right? He blames all the people in the Reichstag, which is, if you don't know, the Reichstag is Reichstag. Again, sorry for the German pronunciations, but it's basically like Parliament or Congress, or you know what I mean. It's the governing body of Germany, and so Ludendorff blames them for it. He's like, it's all their fault. We had nothing to do with this, and people like Adolf Hitler and others discredit the new government before it even began, right? So like the new government hasn't even started yet, and there's already people saying that, one, the November criminals, this is something that's going to come up again and again, the November criminals, there is a very large feeling of anti-Semitism within Germany during this time. Just, like I said, we think about the Nazis and their radicalism. It's not just the Nazis that are, on this far right side, and everybody else, there's anti-Semitism all over the place. Anti-Marxism, right? During this time period, right, like 1918, Russia's going through its revolution, right? The Red Army, the Bolsheviks. This is all stuff I'll talk about in another episode. We're not going to get into it specifically, but whenever I say November criminals, right, it's a myth. It's not real. It's going to come up again and again and again as we talk about the Nazis, and it's something very careful you have to be when you start researching into not just Nazi ideology, but German philosophy as a whole during this time period. So anytime I say November criminals, know that, one, the November criminals don't exist, and it is specifically targeting Jews, and it is specifically targeting Marxists and anybody who basically is not an Aryan German, right? Whenever we say November criminals, that is what Hitler is using. He's using November criminals to say Jews, to say Marxists, to say, enemies of the people, that sort of deal. So like I said, this government that is being set up, this Weimar Republic, as it'll be called, really doesn't stand a chance, and we can see that from the beginning here. Oh, hold up, I lost the mouse. That's the problem with using a white background. There we go. It's tough to see the mouse sometimes. All right. So anyway, the failure of the Weimar Republic, right? So Ludendorff and Hindenburg, right? They said they publicly blamed the Reichstag for losing World War I. And this immediately made people distrust the government. People loved Hindenburg. They loved Ludendorff. These guys are heroes. In Germany, the army is seen as like this, they're larger than life figures. Also, too, they are separate institutions, right? So you have the government and you have the army. They are not the same thing. They are two different organizations. They work together. For the most part. I mean, we're going to see how that connection is going to completely fall apart. But before World War I, the army was its own institution and the government was its own institution. And now that the government is gone, it's just the military, right? So political radicalism quickly took the nation by storm. The radical right-wing political parties began committing assassinations of prominent left-wing political figures, right? So you have this radical right-wing political movement that kind of sweeps over the nation, but it's not in one place. There's not one party that everybody's a part of. There's 30 different parties at this time, political parties, right? And so some people are more extreme than others. Some people, there's so many choices a person can make. And that is actually, it's not a good thing, because that means that it's easier for a radical party to get a larger amount of votes. And so it leads to instability where one party takes control for a short period of time, and then another party takes control, and then another party. And the Reichstag is headed in like 5 different directions at the same time. We think about American politics, and a lot of people don't like the two-party system. which is a very good, I mean, it's a fair criticism, and we're not going to get into it here, but the point is that there's a lot of stability in the United States because you have two main parties, and they're constantly butting heads with each other. And then you have smaller political parties underneath that, which, the far left, the far right can kind of attach to. And like I said, in Germany during this time period, there is none of that. It's basically chaos. All right, so Ludendorff, right? So this whole chaos is going. Oh, another thing too, quickly. So the assassinations, right? We're going to go back to the assassinations. The radical right-wing political party members committing assassinations against the prominent left party wing members. Like I said, the left wing is the ones who are really blamed for the like the Novemberists and all that stuff. Like I said, Marxist, communism. Communism is a left-wing party, if you were not aware, and so. The left is held responsible for the Germany losing the war, basically, right? And so because the government was kind of disbanded, right, but the institutions themselves were not. So like their judicial system, if you were a judge before the war, you're still a judge now, right? If you were a general in the army, you're still a general in the army, right? These institutions have not changed. It's just that people no longer trust the political parties like they used to. And so these assassins, right, that are committing these crimes of murdering major political figures are given either little to no prison time, or they were helped to escape, to different countries and whatnot. So that way they would not have to, stand trial, right? And this is something that people are going to take advantage of, right? So you see an assassination on in the newspaper or whatever, and you say, oh man, this guy didn't get charged, maybe I can do it. And it leads to, like I said, widespread chaos within Germany. So like I said, so Ludendorff, right, so after the war, he's using his fame and connections from his military career to continue to spread discontent among the civilian population, right? The military and the upper crust of Germany, what they want to do is they want to destabilize the government. And so I said during this time period, right, so Ludendorff, he's out there, he's making connections. He meets a guy named Adolf Hitler who had recently started up a political party in Bavaria, which is the southernmost, or a southern state of Germany. And it's one of the most populated and largest regions of Germany. It's one of the largest states in Germany. And so that's where Hitler has kind of set up headquarters for the Nazi party. And Ludendorff finds out about him and becomes friends with Hitler. Workers' strikes begin across Germany, right? People don't want to support the government. They don't want the government to work. And like I said, Germany has a very large war debt to pay, right? And so that can be either paid with paper or it can be paid with product, right? So they can either like sell, give wood to France and whatnot, coal, or paper money, either way. Well, if no one's cutting down trees and the railroads aren't working and that sort of thing, then France isn't going to get its payback, right? Like it's not going to get it. And with Germany, right, the Republican government is trying to work, right? Even though Ludendorff and Hitler and all these other political parties are trying to destroy the Republic is trying to stand on its own. It's trying. And so it keeps printing notes because that's the only way it can pay back France, right? Is just through paper money because it has no product. But this caused inflation to skyrocket, right? And so in the early 1920s, right, like by like 22, 23, a loaf of bread would end up costing billions of Reichsmarks, right? So, you have your life savings, right? You have, $200,000 saved up over the course of your entire life. You know what I mean? Which in this time period, the 1920s, is a ton of money, and it's worth nothing. It is worth zero. And so people are very, very upset with, like I said, the Republican government and and like I said, the fact that they can't buy any products. All right, so we're going to talk about Adolf Hitler for here, a little bit. Like I said, this is going to be, This is going to be a bit of a jumping off point for future episodes when we talk about, later World War II episodes. So this is just going to be kind of like a quick background on him. So, oh man, sorry about that. So, if you didn't know, right, we're just gonna go from like basically the bottom up, right? So Hitler was born in Austria, right? So he's not even a German citizen, and at the time this story takes place, he's still not a German citizen, by the way. He joins the German army though during World War One, and afterwards, right after the war's over, he stays in the army for as long as he can. And he is used to teach the army cadets politics and to try to sway them into a more right-leaning direction, right? So he's supposed to scare them from the left and push them towards the right. Again, because the army and the government are two separate institutions, the army is actively working against the government. Right, so he's doing this. He's going to political rallies. He's taking notes on what they stand for. He comes back to class and he teaches it to his students. And so in 1919, he is told by one of his superiors, "Hey, there's this new party. It started up. It's called the German Workers' Party. Go to the meeting and see what you can learn." So Hitler goes to the Worker Party, and he hears what they have to say, and it doesn't really stick to him at all. But at the end of the night, one of the followers or one of the members of this German Workers' Party approach Hitler and say, "Hey, like welcome to the party," that sort of thing. How do you feel about this? And Hitler went on to like a long harangue. Hitler is a very good speaker, right? And so he just starts talking. And the people who are there, the leaders of this organization are pretty impressed by him. And less than a week later, he gets a letter in the mail saying that, "Hey, you're officially invited to the German Workers' Party. Why don't you come down and, join us or whatever." And at the time, Hitler wanted to start his own party, right? So before he joined the army, he was really into, the political movements and whatnot and studying policies and political parties and what worked and what didn't work. And so he wanted to start his own from the ground up. But he figured, hey, you know what? One party's as good as the next. These guys kind of, agree with what I'm saying, and it's going to be pretty easy. There's like 5 or 6 members of the German Workers' Party at this time, so he's like, it's going to be pretty easy to take over power here. And so Hitler impresses the party members. He goes to the meeting and he says, "Look, I guarantee you guys I can have at least, 500 people attend a rally that we do." And so Hitler made a whole bunch of cards, and sent them out to people, just like threw flyers into the streets, basically. And 2,000 people ended up showing up, right? And so he uses this power, right? Hey, I got you 2,000 people. I am now in charge. And pretty much everyone gets behind him. There's a couple people that leave after this, but then he renames the party, right, to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is known, obviously, as the Nazis. He picked this new name so it would appeal to both the left and the right political wings, right? So National Socialist German Workers' Party, right? So no matter what you want, whether you want, more focus on the workers, well, that's part of the name. You want a strong national government. Well, hey, that's in our name. You want to be socialist. You're on the left. Okay, man, hey, we're socialists too. The thing is, right, so this name is a complete lie, right? Hitler doesn't care about the workers. He doesn't care about being socialist. There's 2 things he cares about, and that's national Germans. That's all he cares about. He doesn't want to be socialist. That's the last thing he wants, actually. But he will lie, and he will deceive in order to get what he wants, right? So even from the very beginning of the Nazi party, it was all about deception, right? So like I said, so once he takes control of the party, he makes all of the current party members swear like an oath of allegiance, basically. He starts taking on the moniker Führer, right? This is when he starts going by Führer. And like I said, everybody except for a couple people don't join up with him. They pretty much disappear from history. And it's kind of Hitler's show to run. So Hitler quickly went to work making connections, right? He's going around town. He's shaking hands. He's giving speeches. Like I said, that's his greatest gift, is his ability to give speeches. His ability to talk is just, so much, is his best asset. You know what I mean? He has, he said he's a scumbag or whatever, but the man can talk. And so Again, what he's doing is he's condemning the November criminalists, right? He's praising the German people. He's saying, the German people were strong during the war. The German people could have won the war, and that they're superior to other races and that they deserve more because they're German. And the Jews need to be punished and the November criminalists need to be punished. We need to burn and kill and, and you guys are, the German people are perfect and all that jazz, right? And so in 1921, Hitler forms the SA, or Stormtroopers, or Brown Shirts, basically, finding thugs, former boxers, bouncers, people that work in like the Navy. You know what I mean? You're just thinking big, strong, dumb guys. That's who Hitler wants, and that's who he gets. Hitler would then use the SA to physically attack opposing political parties. Like, a party we don't agree with is about to make a speech. Let's go and, beat the guy up that's going to be making the speech. Make sure he never talks again. Let's go kill a couple people, right? Like, the Nazis are extremely violent, and they were not afraid to use extreme violence in order to get what they wanted, right? And that's from, like, the very beginning. That's not like... That took a couple years to develop. I mean, he joined the party in 1919, and by 1921, we're already killing political opponents. So, not great. And then the Hitler Youth is founded in 1922, made up of the children of the members of the Nazi Party, right? So Hitler's already putting in the framework of what we'll experience again in 1930. He's doing it now, And so, yeah, so that's kind of Hitler. That's how he got started. And that's the Nazi Party at the start of this, right? During the Beer Hall Putsch. All right, so the Ruhr and the Allies. Okay, so we got to talk about the Treaty of Versailles a little bit, and we got to talk about Mussolini. I plan on doing an episode of Mussolini, but for right now, the only important thing we need to know is that Mussolini decides to march on Rome in 1922. He takes over. He's a fascist dictator. He's far right, And so Hitler goes, well, hey, Mussolini did it. We can do it. Let's get a whole bunch of people together. Let's march on Berlin and let's take that over. And so after the Treaty of Versailles, right, the Rhineland was demilitarized, right? So that's the basically the border zone between them and France, right? Between Germany and France is the Rhineland. With Germany unable to pay its debts, right? So it's printing billions of dollars and it's not working. There's no production going on in Germany at this time. Due to all the strikes. And so a clause in the Treaty of Versailles is like if Germany can't pay its debts, France is allowed to occupy parts of Germany's territories, the high industrial zones, the places of the largest manufacturing. France can occupy those zones in order to extract the resources it needs for Germany to repay its debt, right? And so, like I said, so Hitler's going around, he's tub thumping, right? He's doing political rallies, he's shaking hands, and so he's recruiting police officers who were more than not former soldiers, right? So again, whenever Hitler's giving these speeches, he's saying the army's so great, the soldiers who fought were so brave, and that, like I said, that really hits a chord with the anti-Semitic soldiers who were tricked into thinking that the Novemberists lost them the war instead of what really happened, which was that Germany simply could not keep up with the demands of fighting the United States, France, and Great Britain. That was the reality of the end of World War I, was just that, Germany was tuckered out basically. And the army certainly was beat, but there's this belief, this lie that every soldier tells himself that, no, the German army was never defeated, and we could have fought forever. That's the lie they tell themselves. And so whenever Hitler tells them that, they're like, yeah, that's what I've been thinking the whole time. And so it might not even, like I said, anti-Semitism is a part of the Nazi Party. It is, right? But you have to understand too, like how did Hitler get everybody? You know what I mean? Like all of Germany fell to Nazi rule at some point in the future. How is he able to do that? Well, he tells everybody exactly what they want to hear. And they eat it up. And whenever he does lie, nobody fact checks him. So like I said, so police officers, former soldiers, current soldiers too, people who are in the German military join the Nazi Party. So they're in the military and they're in the Nazi Party. Business owners and young disenfranchised youth, right? So these kids that just come out of high school or are still in high school, and they're looking around at this wrecked Germany, right? The economy is awful. You can't buy bread, right? And here's this, Hitler guy who seems to have everything figured out. Like, let's see what he's about. And he uses these connections to spread terror across the free state of Bavaria. Like I said, so Bavaria is a state, and Hitler is using the SA to, like I said, beat up political opponents, kill people he doesn't want, and just start stirring up trouble. And the whole time he's stirring up trouble, so he'll go out and he'll beat someone up. And then the next day he'll give a speech stating how that it's the, Bavarian government's fault that this person got beat up. He's like, oh, the police, do the best they can, but the government just doesn't, back them or whatever. And he's the one out there beating people up with bats. So, they said he's very, very good at deception and lying and getting what he wants. All right, so the Bavarian government, right, they have enough. They're like, okay, we got to stop all these assaults and all this brutality. And so the Bavarian state government declares a state of emergency, and they grant dictatorial powers to, I'm going to try my best here, Gustav Ritter von Kahr, the state police chief Hans Ritter von Caesar, and General Otto von Laszlo. I think I did all right with that. So in September, right? So in September 1923. By the way, the Ruhr was occupied in January, right? So in January 1923, France occupies the Ruhr. So like over the spring, the summer, and the early fall, like I said, the Reichsmark, it falls more and more and more over the course of that time. And so in September, Hitler promised to make 14 speeches, right? And Kahr, using his newfound dictatorial powers, bans all public speeches, right? He's like, Hitler can't make any speeches. No one can make speeches. No more speeches. And this is because Kahr secretly wants to overthrow the Republic as well, right? He wants to overthrow the Weimar Republic, and he wants to put himself in charge, right? He doesn't want Hitler to be in charge. He wants to be in charge. But he's like, oh, Hitler has this idea to overthrow the government. That sounds like a great idea. I'm going to steal that. And so he wants to seek the support of the Nazi Party. Basically, what Kahr wants to do is he wants to supplant Hitler as the leader of the Nazi Party, and then go on to, overthrow the Republic, right? And so what he starts doing is he starts expelling Jewish families and disbanding leftist organizations. Again, the left is going to be, like I said, the main target of the Novemberists, the Marxists, the Jews. And so he was saying that these Jewish families were spies from like France and whatnot, that these Jewish families were criminals and whatnot. A lot of these families had lived where they were living for generations, right? But again, nobody really does anything to stop Kahr, and in fact, they support him. So, I said in November 1923, right? So like I said, the Reichsmark has been falling all year, and we hit November, and it's 4 billion marks for $1 US, right? So, you got to think about that for a second, right? In order to buy $1 US, you need 4 billion marks. Nobody has that amount, right? It's worthless. The currency is worthless, which is actually a great thing for Germany, right? Because if your currency isn't worth anything, then you don't have to pay back your debt, right? Like, that's their thinking, and that's what happens. Germany just stops paying its debt because its money isn't worth anything, and so it gets out of the debt for free, basically. And the civilians have no idea, right? The civilians can't buy bread. They can't get anything. You can't buy anything. And meanwhile, the upper crust is getting out of its war debt scot-free, and the people have no idea. All right, so like I said, Kahr, Caesar, and Loslau, they are in charge of Bavaria, and on November 8th, 1923, they decide to hold a meeting at the Burger Breikelle. I think I said that right. It's a beer hall inside of Munich, and like I said, they're going to have a little meeting there. So the putsch itself, right? So we're going to get into what actually happened on the night whenever Hitler arrived, right? So the putsch, right? So 600 browncoats, right? The stormtroopers, the SA, Hitler's thugs, show up to the beer hall and surround the building, right? Armed with a revolver, Hitler storms into the hall. He jumps up on a table and he fires a round into the ceiling. Everybody turns around and, looks at what the commotion is. Hitler jumps down off the table, and he has, two armed, Nazi thugs with him, and he pushes his way through the crowd up to the podium. Carr was in the middle of making a speech at that point, kind of backs away from the podium, and Hitler steps up to it. And like I said, I've put a couple speeches in here from Hitler over the course of this. Just like I said, he's a very good orator, and I wanted to try to convey that. So I said, he reaches the podium and he starts shouting into the microphone. The National Revolution has begun. This building is occupied by 600 heavily armed men. No one may leave the hall unless there is immediate quiet. I shall have a machine gun posted in the gallery. The Bavarian and Reich governments have been removed, and a provisional national government formed. The barracks of the Reichswehr and the police are occupied. The army and the police are marching on the city under the swastika banner, right? And so that's a lie, right? So Hitler says the National Revolution has begun, but all he's done is he walked into a beer hall with a pistol, right, and fired it into the air. The building is occupied by 600 heavily armed men, and he does have a machine gun posted in the gallery, right? So, and then, of course, the last part too, the Bavarian and Reich governments have been removed. That's not true, right? The governments are still in place. And the Reichswehr and the police, so the Reichswehr is the army, that's like the name of the army, and the police departments are occupied. Hitler had a plan to do that. We'll see what happens. And the army and the police are marching onto the city. That is certainly not true. He does not have the support of the army or the police. He has parts of it. He has some members of the police. He has some members of the army, but he does not have the entire army. And so the crowd, right, listening to this speech, don't know what to believe, right? Because on one hand, right, it seems kind of crazy that the army and the police have suddenly backed this kind of crazed lunatic. But at the same time, his revolver's real, and the 600 armed thugs are real, and the machine gun's real. So, let's not disagree too hard, I guess. So at the point of the gun, right, Hitler grabs the three leaders, and he forces them into the back room off a side hall. As Hitler's kind of walking away with the guys with the gun pointed at their backs, a businessman stands up and looks towards several police officers that are in attendance and in uniform, and he yells out, don't be cowards like in 1918, shoot. And they said that's in reference to the, to the Novemberists, right? Because like I said, Carr was like just as radical as Hitler was. He too wanted to, perform a putsch over the government. And so this crowd that he's talking to, these people in the crowd, they already believe that the Novemberists exist. They already believe that the Jews are the bad guys. Like they're already on his side. And so like I said, but they don't want to go, Hitler's too radical for them right now. And so, like I said, the guy stands up and, yells shoot, but the police officers would not intervene, right? So Hitler had members within the police, Hitler had members within the army. And so he had a spy at police headquarters who gave the order to the police that they should not intervene. They should merely observe and report back what they see, right? And so that's what the police do because Hitler told them to do that. It's just that they don't necessarily know it's Hitler giving that order, right? So it's like, they said the deception and disguise and lying, Hitler's great at that. So like I said, the police would not intervene and the crowd begins to get restless, right? They're like, who the hell is this jackass? We're just trying to have a good night, drink our beer, listen to a couple speeches, be mad about the government. Like, there's no reason to bring a gun into this, man. That's kind of crazy. And so, like I said, people see Hitler as a jumpy upstart and do not fully take him seriously. Like I said, on one hand, he does have a gun, you know what I mean? But at the same time, he shot one into the air and he's like not shooting people in the crowd. And so like I said, they don't really know what to think, right? But they're definitely like not happy. And so Hermann Goering, we'll talk about Goering, probably in a later podcast episode too. Like I'm not going to go through every single person in the story. We'd be here for hours. But I said Goering, he's a high-level Nazi official within the party. He goes up onto the podium and he begins to speak in Hitler's place, trying to calm the crowd. He's quoted as saying, "There's nothing to fear. We have the friendliest intentions. For that matter, you have no need to grumble. You've got your beer," right? So that's kind of like the juxtaposition here between the Nazi party in that they can change face in a second, right? Hitler fires off a gun, there's a machine gun pointed at you, and then, 2 seconds later, the guy's up on stage cracking a joke, and so like I said, this keeps people on their toes, and it doesn't, they don't know what to think. You're giving them you're kind of overwhelming them, right? And so everybody just kind of hangs out, they just kind of hang out and drink their beer, and Hitler goes into the back room to start a new government. At least that's what he thinks he's doing. All right, so like I said, the new government, right? So in the back of the beer hall, Hitler forces his hostages into the room and locks the door, and he says, "No one leaves this room alive without my permission." He then informs them that Ludendorff and he were starting a new government, and that they would all have high-ranking government jobs either in Bavaria or Berlin, right? So Hitler grabs these guys, he points a rifle or a revolver at their head, and he says, all right, you're going to take new jobs. They're going to be very high paying, and, you're going to have a lot of responsibility, but you're going to have a lot of power too. It's going to be a really good job. And so again, there's this kind of juxtaposition between, threats of violence and then promises of reward, right? He goes back and forth on that. And so Hitler had dispatched a party member earlier that night to go and get Ludendorff. Ludendorff had no idea this was happening, by the way. He was like a fringe member of the Nazi party for a while, and then he kind of got his feet in. And so Hitler asked him the one day, he was like, hey, would you back me, if I decided to go for a coup? And Ludendorff was like, yeah, if we try to do it the right way, basically, he wants to go through the proper channels sort of deal, and he wants to really plan it out, And so Hitler, ignores him, grabs a gun, and goes to the beer hall. And so he's like, okay, well, we need Ludendorff at this point, he's a key part of the plan. And so Ludendorff is brought to the beer hall, right? And so Hitler tells the men that he has in front of him that they will either accept their new positions or they would no longer exist. So again, take this really high-paying job or I shoot you in the head, And for a lot of people, that's not even a question. That being said, Carr, Sizer, and Laus, they refused to even look at Hitler. They wouldn't even give him the time of day. They're not going to talk to him. They're not going to answer him. They're going to just look away from him and just, basically forget he's there. So Hitler starts to get shook by this, right? So he was like, all right, I tried threatening. I tried promising reward. I tried threatening and promising reward at the same time. It's not working. And so he grabs the gun, points it at each of them, and says, I have 4 shots in my pistol, 3 for my collaborators if they abandon me, meaning them, right? He's like, if you 3 abandon me, I'm going to shoot you, and the last bullet is for myself. He then turns the gun to his head, and he yells, if I am not victorious by tomorrow afternoon, I will be a dead man, right? And so he screams this, right? Very intense. And so after that last outburst, Carr tells Hitler, Herr Hitler, you can have me shot or shoot me yourself. Whether I die or not is no matter. Right? And so, like I said, Carr and Sizer and Lauso, they made a lot of mistakes, right? Whenever they took over the dictatorial powers, by trying to suppress Hitler, really what they did was they just made him more prominent kind of deal. Like, they're kind of reaping their reward at this point. I didn't really want to go into it because, like I said, this is more about setting up, the Nazi party and Hitler for later on episodes. But just know that Carr, Sizer, and Laszlo are not completely innocent in this, and that a lot of these issues that they're facing right now, like I said, Hitler pointing a gun at their head, a lot of them did it to themselves. Okay, so like I said, Hitler's talent, right? So again, I said I think this is the last speech I have in here, but they said Hitler is great at speaking. He's great at it. And so whenever he's told that by Carr, right, he's like, hey, shoot me or don't, I don't care. Hitler runs out of the room, he locks the door, and he goes back up to the podium with the 3,000 people still sitting, right? Like, it's still happening out there. The people are still sitting there drinking their beer, and now they're like talking amongst themselves or whatever. Goering's trying to keep them calm. And so Hitler comes sprinting back out on the stage all excited and all happy, right? And he starts, yelling out that the Bavarian ministry is removed. The government of November criminals and the Reich president are declared to be removed. A new national government will be named this very day here in Munich. A German national army will be formed immediately. I propose that until accounts have finally been settled with the November criminals, the direction of policy in the national government will be taken over by me. Ludendorff will take over the leadership of the German National Army. The task of the provisional German national government is to organize the march on that sinful Babel, Berlin, and save the German people, right? And so, out of nowhere, Hitler just, he's like, okay, I'm not getting anywhere with these people in the back. Maybe I can get somewhere with the masses. And so, like I said, Hitler lied through his teeth, right? The people in the back, they did not agree to anything. They did not, there's no government rechange. There is nothing. And Ludendorff does not even know that the revolution is happening. So this whole thing is a lie. Everything about this is a lie. And the people erupt with applause. The people in the room eat this up. They love it. And so the three men in the back room, right? They hear this excited crowd over this new government that's being formed with Hitler, and they're impressed by, the love of the people, basically. And so Ludendorff arrives pretty much at this exact moment, right? As soon as the crowd is erupted in applause and everything, he goes and he joins Hitler in the back room, right? They all go back there, and he's like, okay, we're going to plan our new government or whatever. Ludendorff is very upset with Hitler, right? Like I said, Ludendorff wanted to go through the right channels, and he wanted to do it the right way. There's the right way to do a coup, but Ludendorff is this military guy. He's all about respect and that sort of deal. And so he, like I said, he's mad at Hitler for pulling this stunt. And then whenever Hitler, starts talking to him about the new government they're going to make, right? He's like, okay, I got these positions for Carr, Sessions, and the other guy, Lowell, whatever the fuck his name was, Laszlo. He's like, yeah, so I got these jobs for these guys, and then you're going to be in charge of the army, and I'm going to be in charge of everything. And Ludendorff's like, that's not cool, man. Like, I thought I was going to be in charge, sort of deal. And Hitler's like, well, no, too bad. I'm in charge, by the way. These guys haven't actually agreed to the government yet, so if you could just, kind of persuade them to do that, that'd be great. And Ludendorff falls in line with Hitler. He quickly backs down, and he starts making arguments to the men as why, them holding out is dumb, that he's this great general, Ludendorff, that the army will back him because he's Ludendorff, and that they should just, shut up and, do whatever Hitler tells them to do, basically. All right, so the three men appear to agree to Hitler's demands, right? And so they would go on later in life to say that they never complied, that they never agreed with Hitler. They just said what they had to say in order to get out of the room, which might be true, might not be. But either way, they make it appear that they agreed, and so Hitler walks back out of the room, triumphant with his new, alliance or whatever, and they all make small speeches, right? Each man gets up, they pledge allegiance to each other, they pledge allegiance to the Nazi Party, and they basically tell everybody that, yeah, the new government thing's happening, right? So shortly after this, word came to Hitler about fighting between SA troops and regular army. At the nearby barracks, right? So the Hitler had sent out his stormtroopers, right? They were going to take key parts of the city during this. They were going to take over the police station. They were going to take over the barracks. They were going to hold other key governmental positions within the city in order to, like I said, really overthrow the government, right? In order to do that, you have to take away the army, you have to take away the police, and you have to replace it with your own people. And so Hitler tells his SA to go out and do that. And so this one group of SA troops, they arrive at this barracks, and the army starts putting up a fight. And so Hitler, he drives over to the barracks to take care of the problem personally. He leaves Ludendorff in charge of the beer hall, right? He's gonna, hey, keep an eye on these three hostages, and start working on a government, right? Like, we're gonna be marching into Berlin, we're gonna march on Munich, we're gonna march on Berlin, start planning that stuff. So that way, whenever I come back from this little scuffle that's happening, we'll be able to start putting things into motion. Right, and so very quickly after Hitler left, Laszlo manages to slip out of the building, followed by the other two, right? And so Hitler comes back, right? He's all smiles because he just, solved that little problem with the troops. The SA are taking over the barracks, and so he comes back and he's like, "All right, sweet, we're gonna get this new government going." And he finds out his hostages are gone. Right? And nobody's doing anything, right? People aren't being organized. There's no marches being organized. There's no plan to seize other assets. One of the groups that he went and he said he solved that problem with that barracks. There was another group under Ernest Röhm that were occupying army headquarters. And that's it. None of the other SA groups that Hitler had organized are actually going out and doing anything. And this has included the telegraph office, right? Hitler wanted to take the telegraph office because, again, the early 1920s, the only way you can really communicate effectively over long range in a short period of time is the telegraph. And so without controlling the telegraph station, they're quickly able to get word to Berlin that, hey, there's a putsch going on. What should we do about it? And very quickly orders came back that the army was to suppress the insurrection immediately, right? So the army's under strict orders, shut this down, right? So many officers in the German military were upset by Hitler's treatment of General Laszlo. Like I said, he was a general. Like I said, we're not going to really go into him at all, but just know that he was a general, and people saw it as a major problem that Hitler pointed a gun at him, right? Like that's when they said the army is very revered, and especially the army is revered by the people in the army. And so pointing a gun at a general is a major no-no. And so, like I said, people are very upset by that. So Hitler traveled to the headquarters occupied by his SA and Rom, right? So he goes there, he sees what's going on. And Rom was very surprised that he was the only one to take action, right? He's like, really, nobody else did anything? And so by dawn the next day, the army had surrounded that headquarters. Hitler had gone back to the beer hall, right? He shows up to Rom. He's like, hey, good job taking care of this. By the way, you're the only one that did anything. I'm going to go back to the beer hall kind of deal. All right, so a desperate move, right? So Hitler's back at the beer hall. Him and Ludendorff and like the rest of the Nazis are kind of chilling in the beer hall. They don't really know what to do. Hitler throws out the idea. He's like, well, why don't we escape out into the, countryside, and we'll get a bunch of peasants together, and we'll, arm the peasants, and we'll come back, and we'll, have a bigger fighting force. Ludendorff's like, that's a really dumb idea. Let's not do that. And so, like I said, Hitler, he didn't want to hurt the police officers, and he didn't want to hurt those in the army, believing deep down inside that they all hated the Republic, and they all wanted to see the November's strung up, right? Every time Hitler would be put in a position where he has to kill someone in the army or kill a police officer, that's one less person who could support him. You know what I mean? He wants to win over their hearts. He doesn't want to just, kill everything that's in his way. He wants to kill the criminals. He wants to kill the Jews. They said, again, we're going to say November's criminals. They're not actually criminals. They don't exist, right? But in Hitler's, fucked up brain, he sees them as criminals, right? And so that's who he really wants to kill. He doesn't want to kill the people that could be on his side. And so in one last desperate move, right, Ludendorff says, hey, look, I am a high-ranking German general. I am a hero of World War I. I am, there's no way any man in the army would ever shoot on me, Ludendorff. I am too important. I am too awesome. They're not going to shoot at me. And so Ludendorff takes the 3,000 or so SA troops that remain under Hitler's control, and they're just basically going to march out of the beer hall. They're going to go to the center of town, and they're just going to take it over. Right? They're going to say, hey, look, like I said, Ludendorff's going to go, hey, I'm Ludendorff. I'm that awesome guy you all know. Come join me, because that's just the right thing to do. That's Ludendorff's plan. Hitler's skeptical, but he doesn't have anything else better to do. He has no other plan, so they go for it. So Hitler, Ludendorff, other top Nazi officials, right, like Röhm and Goering, they're all there. They start marching down the road carrying a Nazi banner, and they have a truck behind them that's full of machine guns and men arming the machine guns. And then they reach this bridge, right, that's being guarded by a bunch of police officers. And Goering, he steps forward, and he yells at the bridge. Basically, he yells at the police, we have hostages, and we're going to kill every single one of them if you don't let us cross the bridge. And he did, in fact, have several members of the Bavarian government, right? So at this beer hall meeting, they said it was these three, main dictators in charge of Bavaria, but there's also, cabinet members and members of the Reichstag and that sort of deal. And so the Nazis were very good at picking out the important people that they would need for later to keep them as hostages. And so, like I said, he wasn't bluffing. Goering would have done this. And the police stood down, whether they believed him or not. They stood down. So it was they either supported Nazi ideology and wanted to see the revolution continue, or they just didn't want the cabinet members to be shot. Either way, they got out of the way. And so outside the defense ministry, right, a small military force was arrayed. So they said they're moving down the street. They want to go to the center of town, and the center of town's the defense ministry. And so the army wouldn't move, right? So again, they tried the same tactic. One of the Nazis stepped out of the column and yelled, "Make way! His Excellency Ludendorff is coming!" Right? So hey, Ludendorff's coming. You like Ludendorff? You move out of the way, and the army doesn't give a shit. So shots fired, right? So no one is sure who fired the first shot, right? So members of the Nazi Party say that Hitler fired the first shot, right? Because I mean that just fits the narrative, you know what I mean? But like, there's so much Nazi propaganda that it could have been anybody. But later on, in like whenever the Nazi Party comes back, in the late 1930s, or the mid 1930s. A lot of Nazi members at that time who were also members back now, like, back in the 1920s, they say that this is the moment that endeared them to Hitler forever. You know what I mean? The reason why they followed Hitler for so long is because he fired the first shot that day, during the Beer Hall Putsch. Jesus. Hitler would use this moment, like I said, later on in speeches to expand the legend of Nazi Party, right? So, he just exaggerates and continues to tell this story over and over again about the brave Nazi members, and to bolster the members of the party that were, there facing gunfire, right? So, later on, whenever Hitler is actually in control of the government and he's appointing members to certain, high-ranking positions and whatnot, he uses the fact that they were there with him in this moment as a reason for why they deserve to have the position they have. Both sides opened fire. In less than 60 seconds, fire stopped. 16 Nazis and 3 police lay dead or dying on the ground. And Hitler and the rest of the Nazis are all laying face down on the ground, hoping not to be shot. Like I said, the 16 that are dead and the rest of them are all on the ground. Ludendorff is the only one not to drop to the ground, okay? So, I don't like Ludendorff, right? Nazi, bad guy. Luden's bad. That being said, it is kind of impressive that he faces this line of gunfire and he doesn't drop to the ground. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't move. He stands there because he knows for a fact that these guys in the army are not going to shoot the famous Ludendorff. And they don't shoot him. And so Ludendorff just holds his head strong. He stands up proud in his, full army regalia, and he walks across the line, right past the guns. Doesn't care. He just keeps walking. Not a single Nazi followed him, right? Hitler didn't follow him. Goering didn't follow. Not a single Nazi decided to follow Ludendorff. And in fact, as soon as the fire stopped, Hitler got up and he ran away. He was like one of the first people to run away. There's several sources for that. That Hitler was the first person to run away. He got into a car where he traveled to a friend's house to recover. So whenever he dropped to the ground, he was actually pulled to the ground by, I think it was his bodyguard or something. And so whenever they pulled him to the ground, they pulled out his shoulder. And so he goes to his friend's house. They fix his shoulder or whatever. And he's arrested at that house 2 days later. Ludendorff was actually arrested on the spot, saying after his arrest that he would never again acknowledge a German officer nor wear an officer uniform, right? He's very disappointed by this. He wanted the army to join him, right? He wanted the army to come to his aid, and that would be a power that he would have over Hitler, right? In that the army didn't come to Hitler's aid, it would come to Ludendorff's aid, and that way Ludendorff could say, well, hey, you have the SA, well, I have the army, And the fact that the army did not come to Ludendorff means that he doesn't have the backing of the army, right? The SA could potentially outnumber the army, which, spoiler alert, it does eventually. Obviously not yet. Actually, in fact, the entire Nazi party is about to crumble because over the next couple of days, right? So Hitler gets arrested. A couple days later, pretty much everybody who was involved in this coup, like all the leaders of it, all the organizers, are all arrested. And so then and they're going to be put on trial. But like I said, right, so we're going back to the very beginning of the episode when I first talked about the political movements within Germany are very lenient to right-wing people, right? So the Nazi party is obviously as right can get. And Ludendorff, like I said, despite the fact that the army didn't come to his aid, they also didn't shoot him, right? So there's like this on the fenceness with the whole thing where it's like, well, on one hand, we don't like that you try to take over the government. On the other hand, we don't really disagree with you. So it is what it is. We're going to cover, later on, like I said, Hitler's trial, his imprisonment, and then what happened after he got out of jail. Kind of what happens with Ludendorff. We're gonna cover that in a later episode.
But I'm actually really happy about this. I thought I was going to go a lot longer. Like I said, I'm going to have to listen back to it to make sure that I'm fully happy with the episode. But 54 minutes right now, about 55 minutes we're about to be at, and we just got through the whole Beer Hall Putsch. Oh man, that's giving me so much hope for the Napoleon episode, because I might be able to do more with it now. Like I said, this was going to be a bit of a test run. Like I said, one, dipping the toes into World War II. We're going to start getting, I'm going to go back to the Civil War. We're still going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about, there's a couple mountaineering disasters I want to talk about. And different conflicts in different parts of the world during different time periods, right? But for the time being, like I said, we're going to mainly focus on the Civil War. And we're going to focus on World War II. But yeah, I'm really, really, really happy with how that went. Like I said, I'm going to have to listen back to it. I won't be afraid to re-record it if I need to. But hopefully you're listening to this right now, and I decided to put it out. So yeah, man, that's a podcast episode. I don't know when the next one's going to be up. Probably the next couple days, or it might be longer. I'm not too sure. Whether it's going to be something with the Civil War or something with World War II, I'm not too sure. Like I said, we might just go right into next episode. Might be, like I said, Hitler's trial. Kind of depends on, like I said, how I feel about how I recorded this. I said, if I like how it turned it out, you know what I mean? Like I said, I still have a lot more to say on this topic, and we have a lot more story to get to. But yeah, man, that's a podcast episode, I guess. So as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And hey, namaste.